The old school building sat at the edge of town, forgotten by time and buried beneath the weight of its own dark history. Shrouded in overgrown vines, with windows shattered like empty eyes, it loomed in the moonlight like a silent, spectral figure. Long abandoned, its once lively halls had fallen into decay, and yet, whispers among the locals suggested that something inexplicable remained within those crumbling walls. It was said that strange noises echoed through the empty corridors late at night, the shuffle of footsteps, the faint sound of children's laughter, or the distant clanging of a bell that hadn't rung in decades. Even more disturbing were the sightings, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures darting through the halls, a child's voice calling out from somewhere deep within the school, and, on rare occasions, the pale face of a young girl peering out from a darkened window. People avoided the building. It had become a place of legend, where fear kept even the most curious at bay. But, as with all urban legends, there were always those who dared to confront the unknown. And that's how I found myself standing at the school's rusted gate, flashlight in hand, staring up at the decrepit facade as the wind held through the cracks in the old bricks. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, like the building itself was watching me, waiting for me to cross the threshold into its haunted depths. I had heard the stories of paranormal investigators who had been driven mad, of thrill seekers who had entered the school, only to emerge days later, confused and terrified, unable to speak of what they had seen. But I had come to uncover the truth. I wanted to know if the legends were real, if the school was truly haunted by the spirits of those long gone. As I pushed open the creaking gate and took my first step onto the weed-choked path that led to the entrance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to step into a place where the line between the living and the dead no longer existed.
Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling episode of Wicked Whispers, where the shadows come alive and nightmares whisper their secrets.
Built in the early 1900s, the school was once the heart of the small, close-knit community that surrounded it. It was a place where generations of children had learned, laughed, and grown into adulthood. The red brick building, with its tall arched windows and stately clock tower, had been a beacon of education and progress in the area. But beneath its respectable exterior, the school had a history of tragedy and loss. The first incident that darkened the school's history occurred in 1935, when a fire broke out in the basement. The fire spread rapidly, consuming classrooms and trapping students and teachers inside. Although most were able to escape, 3 children and 1 teacher lost their lives in the blaze. The cause of the fire was never determined, and some whispered that it had been started deliberately, a sinister act that had left the building cursed. Despite the tragedy, the school reopened after repairs, continuing to serve the community for decades. But the sense of unease that lingered within its walls never fully dissipated. Over the years, students and teachers alike reported strange occurrences, books flying off shelves, lights flickering on and off, and the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls when no one was there. Most dismissed the incidents as the overactive imaginations of children, but the stories persisted. Then, in the 1960s, another tragedy struck. A young girl named Emily Harper, a student at the school, disappeared without a trace. She had been last seen playing on the swings in the playground during recess, but when the bell rang, she never returned to class. A massive search was conducted, but Emily was never found. Her disappearance devastated the community, and though rumors swirled that she had run away, many believed that something more sinister had happened. In the years that followed, some claimed to have seen Emily's ghost wandering the playground at dusk, her white dress fluttering in the breeze as she swung on the rusty old swing set. Others reported hearing her voice, faint and distant, calling out for help. The school's dark reputation only grew, and by the 1980s, declining enrollment and the weight of its haunted history led to its closure. The building was abandoned, left to decay, and over time, it became a magnet for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. As I ventured deeper into the school, flashlight beam flickering across dusty desks and peeling walls, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. The air inside the building was cold and damp, and every breath felt heavy, like the very atmosphere was thick with the weight of the past. I made my way down a long corridor, the walls lined with faded black and white photographs of former students and teachers. Their faces stared back at me, frozen in time, and I couldn't help but wonder how many of them had heard the same strange sounds I was now hearing, soft whispers, almost like the faint murmur of a conversation just out of earshot. I reached the entrance to what had once been the gymnasium, the large double doors hanging crooked on their hinges. Pushing them open, I stepped into the vast, empty space. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. The silence was suffocating, and yet, as I stood there, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a basketball bouncing on the hardwood floor. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. The sound continued, steady and rhythmic, coming from somewhere deeper in the gym. My flashlight beam swept across the floor, but there was no one there. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence that felt heavier than before. I wasn't alone. I knew that much. One of the most famous stories tied to the abandoned school was the ghost of Emily Harper, the young girl who had disappeared all those years ago. According to legend, her spirit still lingered in the playground behind the school, forever searching for a way back inside. I decided to see for myself. The playground was overgrown with weeds, the old swing set rusted and broken, its chains creaking softly in the wind. As I stood there, staring at the swings, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about the place felt wrong. It was as though time had stopped here, the world frozen in a moment of forgotten childhood. And then I saw her. At first, it was just a glimpse, a flash of light out of the corner of my eye. But when I turned, she was there, standing in the shadows at the edge of the playground. A young girl in a white dress, her long hair hanging loose around her face. She stood perfectly still, watching me, her dark eyes unblinking. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the grass. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask her who she was, but the words caught in my throat. Something about her felt wrong. As she moved closer, I noticed that her dress was torn and dirty, her skin pale and cold, like a figure from a forgotten photograph. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. I stood there, frozen in place, heart racing, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen the ghost of Emily Harper, her spirit trapped in the place where she had disappeared all those years ago. The basement was the one place I had been dreading. It was here that the fire had started all those decades ago, and it was here, according to legend, that the most malevolent of the spirits resided. The stairs creaked ominously as I descended into the darkness, the air growing colder with each step. My flashlight flickered, the beam casting long shadows on the damp, stone walls. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and small, windowless rooms, many of which had been used for storage. But as I moved deeper into the basement, I began to feel a sense of dread unlike anything I had felt before. The air was thick with the stench of mold and decay, and the temperature had dropped significantly. My breath came out in visible puffs, and my skin prickled with goosebumps. Then, without warning, the door to one of the storage rooms slammed shut behind me, the sound reverberating through the corridor like a gunshot. I spun around, shining my flashlight on the door, but it was still. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, or perhaps a loose hinge, but deep down, I knew better. Something was down here with me. I heard a soft shuffling sound, like footsteps moving across the floor, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Slowly, I turned the flashlight toward the source of the sound, my heart hammering in my chest. Standing in the corner of the corridor, just beyond the reach of the flashlight beam, was a figure. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by shadow, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold and unblinking. I took a step back, my hands shaking, but the figure remained still, watching me. And then, slowly, it began to move toward me, its footsteps slow and deliberate, echoing through the narrow hallway. I turned and ran,